This is Vikes Now. I'm Dustin Baker, and you can consider this a pilot. I am a YouTube novice. So right now I'm in my kids' playroom and I have toys in the background. That's why I've got this fabulous background. I'll work on that, getting a better set and all that. But I need to do something, and I am not quite doing the live yet. I need to do something to get it off the ground. So I'm going to try this pre-recorded thing and go from there. What I'm talking about today for 20, 30 minutes is going to be the Vikings offseason, the pros and cons, or why you should be concerned and why you should be optimistic and not concerned. So I'll just kick it right off. Ultimately, on the show, it'll be more professional. I'll get guests, I'll have a cooler layout. But this is to get me off the ground, to get something postable so that the world can see kind of what it'll feel like on a Monday through Friday daily basis. So, concern. I know I'm going to have camps on both sides here, those that are concerned, those that aren't. And this is all hinging on the Zadarius Smith news, which could hit at any minute, which kind of nullifies the concern because he's a big deal. But on the whole, I think the concerning items, I'll start with one, is the uniformity from what we've seen before. A lot of you thought that, hey, we're going to hire these two young, fresh, analytical guys, and this is going to be a completely different enterprise. Well, it hasn't been, not one bit. Everything they've done is like Spielman is the Wizard of Oz, still behind the curtain, running the show, doing the tricks, signing the dudes. The first splash move was a defensive tackle. We've seen that before, whether it was Linval, Michael Pierce, who didn't quite pan out, and then now it was Harrison Phillips from the Bills. So you have the same type of track record for the first shots fired moment of the offseason, and it's a defensive tackle. I don't personally have a beef with that. I thought Rick Spielman did a fabulous job, and we get so bogged down in the stuff that he did wrong, and we lift that up to high heavens, like the Chris Herndon trade was goofy, drafting Christian Ponder sucked, and there are others, the panic trade for Sam Bradford, which some didn't understand, even though the team thought they were this close from contending. Oh, what else was there? There's several more. Ooh, which ones am I forgetting? There's another. The Yannick Ngakoue. That trade was ill-fated because he never fit in, only lasted, 6 games, and was jettisoned to the Ravens, and now he's all over the place. From where did he go? The Raiders and on to the Colts now. But anyhow, so yeah, Spielman had a track record of some strikes, but I would challenge folks to look at his record compared to others. So it doesn't really surprise me a whole hell of a lot when Adolfo Menso comes in, looks at the roster and says, this looks pretty good, because Spielman usually was pretty apt at what he was doing. But if you wanted change this offseason so far through 2 months, you're not getting it. It's the same thing, doing it over again. And they're going to bank on the fact that this roster was constructed with smart, aforethought acumen to get this thing off the ground and to be a contender. The other thing that's concerning is we're going to go at it again with Cousins, who's missed the playoffs in 3 out of 4 times, and we all know how loud the crowd that doesn't believe in him is, and we're just doing it again. We're extending him at a handsome price, even though it's not quite elite tier money. We are giving Cousins $35 million guaranteed per season, and we're saying, hey, pal, we know it didn't work 75% of the time before with this team, but we're going to ask you to change the narrative and go win. And I know that is off-putting for folks in the sense that they don't believe in him. They don't think that he can drag a team to the postseason, which he can't single-handedly. And he's not quite in that tier of Mahomes or Rodgers. And for those that were hoping to see a move away from Cousins and start fresh, you're not getting it. It's just him again. Totally him again. The other thing for concerns is the cornerbacks. So somehow in this journey with Mike Zimmer that started in 2014, we had the joke habitually about which cornerback are the Vikings going to draft this year. It was a great joke because it always hit home, whether it was Gladney, Rhodes was the year before Zimmer got there, Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, Mike Hughes. The joke was real. Zimmer had a fetish, so to speak, for drafting cornerbacks. And the naughty part is we're sitting here with one on the roster that could start, and that's Cameron Dantzler. And he's progressing as a third rounder should. His first year was good. Second year was a little bit better, even though he didn't play for a while there in the doghouse. But if you look at the roster right now, it has one guy, Cameron Dantzler, who can defend wide receivers. Now, the NFC North, incidentally, is skimpy for wide receivers, so it doesn't feel too painful now. But I can guarantee you that there will be games where cornerbacks are needed. So you're going to stare at the offseason moves right now and hope and pray for a cornerback. I expect the team to eventually sign Bryce Callahan and Kyle Fuller because they're Fangian, Donatel type dudes. They'll be cheap and they're decent. They're dudes that you could reasonably put on at CB2 and pair with Dantzler. But all of the clues from this free agency, the lack thereof, Phillips, Hicks, and that's about it, leads us to believe that they will indeed select Ahmad Garner or Derek Stingley or Trent McDuffie, Andrew Booth, one of those dudes at the number 12 overall pick. Now, thankfully, if it's Sauce or if it's Stingley Jr., that should marry the best player available and the team need. And you have to think that that's the plan. Otherwise, they would have signed some cornerbacks because it is terrifying that on March 22nd, the Vikings have one cornerback. That shouldn't give you warm fuzzies. Now, you can look at the rest of the defensive depth chart and start to see a pathway to competence, especially if Daniil Hunter indeed stays. And if Zadarius Smith joins, then you have the two linebackers in the middle with Kendricks and Hicks. And you already have the beef up front, Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips, and Armand Watts showed that he could start. I'm not exactly sure how the front of the defense will be constructed yet. But the gravest concern that you should have at this very moment is that they only have one cornerback. That sucks. There should be multiple cornerbacks. It should be a spoil or a litany of riches at cornerback because you just employed a coach for 8 years who loved them. But nope, it's one dude. And Gladney's going to go play elsewhere with the Cardinals in his reclamation journey because he was found not guilty. And Mike Hughes is going to play for the Lions. And who knows where Trey Waynes will play. That's another thing that hit the newswire yesterday that I want to caution folks is, so when Trey Waynes was released, there was a temptation, a very Vikings fans-ish temptation to say, oh, he'll come back to the Vikings. Those days are probably over because that was a Zimmer-esque and Spielman thing to bring back their guys. Outside of perhaps Keenan McCardell, even the trainer's gone, and the ownership, there aren't any ties that would bring back these old dudes like we used to do. You know, Everson Griffin went to the Lions and Cowboys and then didn't quite work out. And it's like, boom, he's back with the Vikings. That probably won't happen, at least to the degree it used to. Waynes has no ties to this football team other than the memories of a coaching staff and general manager who were fired. So in theory, Waynes could join the Vikings, but it's all just kind of ooh, that would be neat. And I mean, he didn't really do anything with the Bengals. I guess he was decent for the Vikings there, but I wouldn't expect Waynes to be back just because he's played for the team before. So you got that. Your number one panic move, if you need to find something to panic about, is no cornerbacks. It's not a good thing. The lack of a defensive brain leading the enterprise is a little concerning for me. That's because when I started my Vikings fandom in 1996, the team, those 3 years of decent on defense. But when I really came of age, watching every game, getting obsessed with it like you are and like I am now, it was the era of Culpepper, McKinney, and Moss, and didn't really tackle on defense. And I used to watch other organizations, especially those famous Ravens who won the Super Bowl. They played defense like, crazy people. And the Vikings didn't tackle very well. You had to win shootouts. And McKinney talks about that a lot on our podcast, is that they had to score 30 points. And now with Ed Donatel in the saddle, I don't think necessarily that it's like a rubber stamp that the team is going to be poor on defense. But let's face it, a defensive coach who for 6 out of 8 seasons was pretty damn good on that side of the ball, he doesn't work here anymore. So you're taking a first-time head coach who is an offensive brain from the Sean McVay tree and hoping that he hired the right guy in Donatel to lead the defense. Donatel was fabulous during his press conference, and it was really cool how each of these men that's trotted out in the new leadership is really exciting and inspiring and like blows your socks off. But if you look at Donatel's resume, he's not like Zimmer was as defensive coordinator. He's decent. You throw Mike Pettin in there, and he's also decent or average. So the solace that we have is the last 2 years of Vikings football have been trashy for defense. So anything that's better than that monstrosity, especially at the end of halves, is going to be an improvement. So the bar is low somehow. Zimmer's defense was downright bad, I think, and especially in crucial spots for the final 2 years. But on the whole, when you hire an offensive coach, you're banking on the fact that that part of the enterprise, the offense, is going to be fine and dandy because he calls the plays, he knows what to do, and if he takes that Zimmer approach, is hands off on offense and let the dude take care of it, the offensive coordinator. Then conversely, who knows if O'Connell will be hands on on defense, but we shall see. So I think that that is a valid concern that we don't have a defensive brain anymore. And we're going to just have hopes and prayers that the current conglomeration roster and Ed Donatel get this thing ticking. And that's on the backdrop of switching to a 3-4 defense, which 61 years the Vikings have done once in the 80s. It's always been a 4-3 organization. And while it's exciting to try the 3-4, we've never done that before. So you're going to pray that when it's done after 6 decades, it's done effectively. So just have a little bit of defensive reservation in your back pocket. A couple more concerning things. I wrote about this for Vikings Territory the other day. It's that every move that has been made to date by the new general manager has been done under the pretense that Mike Zimmer alone was the problem for the Vikings. If you go look at the roster, look at the things they've done. Adding Jordan Hicks at linebacker, adding Harrison Phillips and Johnny Munt are moves that could have been conducted by Zimmer and Spielman. They weren't like, oh boy, things are different now. They were transactions that were, I think, good ones, but they weren't totally anti-Zimmer in that regard. And then they extended Cousins. They've restructured Thielen, Smith, perhaps Kendricks or Cook. I don't know if those are coming to free up money. And it looks like Hunter's going to stay. So, and no trades, no fire sale, none of that happened. So every move that has been made for player personnel is in the backdrop, is operating under the idea that this team wasn't very good because of one person, and that was Mike Zimmer. And I don't know what happened to him for the final 2 years because I think Zimmer will always get a bum rap based on the reporting that came out afterward that he was kind of a prick and was callous, his way or the highway. We always knew that. I don't know why it became a big newsworthy event when that came out. Thankfully, O'Connell doesn't seem to have that personality, so it'll be a change of pace. But from 2014 to 2019, the Vikings were the 7th best team per win percentage in the business. So they flourished under Zimmer until they didn't. So something happened in these last 2 years, especially on defense, where suddenly the coach isn't very good anymore. Doesn't know how to run defense. Dudes get hurt. He can't use the depth that he has to be at least average. The defense has been poor. But with the all-in stakes that the ownership, I guess, stated from pretty much day one, the day that Zimmer and Spielman were fired, January 10th, the anniversary of Blair Walsh's miss, the enterprise said that we're going to be competitive. Now, some folks thought that was bullshit, like that was just preaching to the choir. Wait until all these trades start happening. Wait until Kirk is finally sent to the Steelers and we get a couple of draft picks. Didn't happen. It's the same core group of superstars that is going to trek into 2022, and they're just going to hope that Zimmer was the problem. And that's kind of a bold way of thinking because that's a single person that would have been the problem. So, the final concern is the financial stuff of kicking the can down the road. Now, the Harrison Smith and Adam Thielen restructures weren't humongous problems to move the money around. But kicking the can down the road on Cousins, just basically re-upping with him for 2 years, is prolonging what could have been a necessary rebuild if you're in that camp. So while they haven't completely mortgaged the financial future like Spielman did every year, just off pushing it down the line until a further date, I think the financial part is there, that because there hasn't been full scale change, they haven't cleared the books, then perhaps they should have already started doing that. All right, so we're at the halfway point. Those are all of the concerns. Here's the reasons why you shouldn't be concerned. And I'll take heat for this one because I use this word and people go, mediocrity. But the word is relevance. In 2022, the Vikings will have guaranteed relevance, and here's why. So for all of the heat that Cousins takes, for better or for worse, true or false, in the middle, whatever, he doesn't lead poor teams. Now, the last 2 years, they've been mediocre. 2019, the team was pretty damn good, but the offensive line came undone. Surprise, surprise, against 49ers, and they looked like garbage. But with Cousins at the helm, you have a puncher's chance to get to the postseason and do something when you get there. So there is a school of thought that says everything that has been done this offseason keeps the team in the playoff hunt. Now, whether you believe in that, it's up to you. I believe that. I believe that the vision by the Wilfs and by Kwesi when they hired the new head coach is they're going to pluck that dude from the McVay tree. And lo and behold, that football team just won a Super Bowl with a quarterback that we know from the Lions, Matthew Stafford. I've said this on the McKinney podcast. I think I tweeted a couple times throughout the years is that we saw Stafford twice per season, and not a single time in my entire life when I watched Lions game did I think, oh, shit, we got to play Stafford. Or when they got the ball back in the fourth quarter, I never thought, ooh, boy, Stafford's going to go down and win this thing. I never feared him. And I think that's how some folks feel about Cousins. So I think the vision here is that O'Connell, with that McVayian brain, can take Cousins the way McVay and O'Connell did Stafford and effectuate it into offensive progress and innovative play calling. And it won't be stale or vanilla like the Kubiak brand. But I believe that the vision there is to replicate what happened in Los Angeles. Probably won't be a Super Bowl in the first year, but if it is, marvelous. We'll have a party on the show. But I think that the relevance part is there that you won't have to endure guaranteed futility that a rebuild would mandate. Again, another disclaimer. I know many of you wanted to see a rebuild. You're not getting it, at least not yet. So you'll get to watch quasi-competitive football in a way that is sans Mike Zimmer. And I don't know, I like going to the stadium here in the background 8 or 9 times per year with the idea the team will actually win, and I'm not going to an assured loss. The other part on why you shouldn't be concerned, I touched on this with the concerns, and so it's kind of devil's advocate, is that perhaps throughout all of this, Rick Spielman was not the devil. If the new general manager came in with a cleaver and said, I'm going to carve this thing up, he would have started doing that by now. But I think Spielman, in a way, is vindicated based on his roster moves that these guys aren't moving around. So I think when Adolfo Mensah saw the roster and took the job, was probably like, holy cow, I can win with this. Because had he not, then we would have seen a flurry of moves, veteran dudes out the door, new free agents, yada, yada, yada. But I think that the lack of free agent splash, and that probably is mainly via trade, indicates and vindicates Spielman was pretty good at his job. And I think that there would already be a lot of different transactions that would tell us otherwise. And of course, I mentioned the bad moves that Spielman had before. I get it. Not a pristine track record, but a lot of dudes don't. The other part of guaranteed relevance that I think is why you should be excited or you shouldn't be concerned is that we don't have to endure a tank. There is a very vociferous crowd in the world, on social media, at your workplaces, writers that believe that the Vikings should tank because I guess the Philadelphia 76ers did it, or the Bengals kind of did it for a year and suddenly got good because they got the quarterback. But I still don't have any viable evidence that shows that intentionally being bad is a forecast or prognosis for the future. If it exists in football, I'd love to see it. And if it's documented or it has a track record of, oh yeah, remember the time the Bengals did it in a single year? I'd like to see more than one example. It's kind of like the offensive line debate. The Bengals had a poor offensive line this year that got to the Super Bowl. And immediately it was like, well, Bengals did it. Vikings, Cousins can't do it. You're picking out one example of a very good young quarterback that led his team to a Super Bowl with a shitty offensive line. And you're disregarding all the other times throughout history when a quarterback cannot circumvent that. And voila, the Vikings are one of those teams that can't circumvent a bad pass protecting offensive line. They haven't done that. And it feels like it's been 10 years since the Vikings had a good pass protecting offensive line. But the broader point is that if, just like there is no sizable track record of poor offensive lines getting to Super Bowls, the outlier was this year's Bengals. I don't know that tanking is a recipe for success. It just feels like you get better draft picks. And if you're a general manager, then sure, because you never think you're going to strike out on draft picks. But almost half of all first-round draft picks aren't very good. They're average or not very good. If you go down the line, it's like almost by round. I think it's 50% of first rounders make at least one Pro Bowl in their career, something like that. I'll have to look at the stat and pull it. And then you get the second round, it's like 40% and then down the line. But tanking relies on being able to draft with competence, and I'm just not sold that would have worked for the Vikings. Now, on the other hand, Vikings never rebuilt. Been a fan for 26 years. I've been writing about the team for 2, and when the writing on the wall became apparent the team wasn't going to rebuild, I think I tweeted, or maybe I just thought it out loud, I can't remember, that they were never going to rebuild because this organization never rebuilds. It's not in their DNA. That's why they remain relevant but Super Bowl-less, is because they always want to be pretty good, and they always are usually pretty good on the whole compared to other franchises. I've tweeted the stat before that in the Super Bowl era, since 1966, the Vikings have the 5th best win percentage in the NFL. And of the top 14 teams in that win percentage, the Vikings are the only one to never win a Super Bowl. So that's why, in your doldrums late in the season when the Vikings are eliminated, it feels so rotten, is because of the top 14 teams in NFL history, Super Bowl era, that have the best win percentage, all of them, except the Vikings, have won the thing. And that's why it feels so doom and gloom. The other part is because the Vikings have lost 6 consecutive NFC championships dating back to, was it 77 or 76? And thankfully, the Packers are getting there too with 4 straight. So it doesn't feel quite as gruesome, even though the Packers have a litany of Super Bowls. They have 4, I think. The final 2 things before we hop off this pilot episode on the why you shouldn't be concerned is the Justin Jefferson angle. So I know there's a lot of hoopla about he doesn't like Kirk Cousins. And then every time you ask him about it, he's like, yeah, I love Kirk Cousins. And I've heard other folks say that all he does is tolerate him. And it's like the young gentleman Jefferson is setting all of these rookie and sophomore records, and Cousins is throwing it to him. Fine and dandy. That's how it's going. But it's bigger than that. Cousins will enable Jefferson to keep up his monumental pace. Like, there would be no reason outside of injury that Jefferson would slow down pairing with Cousins, because in the first 2 years they were dynamic. Fortunately, didn't result in playoff appearance, but that's why they fired the coach. So you have Jefferson staying at his level of production, which I'm sure he enjoys, because Cousins stays in the saddle. More broadly, I think the important part is that had you chose this moment in time to do a Vikings rebuild, which probably would have taken 2 or 3 years, that butts up against crunch time for Jefferson's rookie deal extension. And that's dangerous because you have 2020, no playoffs. You have 2021, no playoffs. If you're going to rebuild in 2022, no playoffs. If you don't quite get there in 2023, no playoffs. That's 4 losing seasons for what we think is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He ain't going to want to stay here. And I don't know if that weighed into the ownership's decision to stay competitive, or that's just my own personal theory. But if you want Jefferson to stay in the North Star State, which I'm pretty sure you do, then it's better that you start winning games now than rebuilding and letting the guy walk. Now, with Devontae Adams' extension in the trade to the Raiders, he's going to be expensive. By the time we roll around to Jefferson's contract talk, which should be about this time next year, he's going to cost $30 million per year. And then we'll have talks like this on this show to determine whether or not he's worth it. Probably. But $30 million for wide receiver is going to be his market price unless he gets hurt in 2022. But on the broad topic, you reduce the chances of losing Jefferson to a different team after his rookie deal expires, because the plan for the Vikings is to win this year. He needs a taste of success. The last 2 seasons have not been successful. So I believe that if the Vikings can get to the postseason and win a playoff game or 2 there, then the chances of Jefferson remaining with the franchise are heightened. Otherwise, you're staring the dude in the face at contract talk time saying, yeah, we haven't got to the playoffs in 4 seasons, but stick with us. It's going to finally change. And I don't think that those would go too swimmingly. And finally, what I have for the reasons why you should not be concerned are the best players are back. You can debate until you're blue in the face whether or not Cousins is one of those, but per the numbers, he is. And if you don't like the numbers and you prefer your eye test, this probably isn't the best show for you. But at least on March 22nd, it appears Daniil Hunter will be back. He won't be traded. Eric Kendricks is still here. Adam Thielen is still here. Dalvin Cook is still here. So the goal, at least for me, and I think the vast population of you, is to win football games on Sundays. They have not traded players away, the best players, to do anything to change that. So if you want a competitive product with the best players that have gone to Pro Bowls, a couple of them been all pro, then I think it is optimistic that the dudes that have been homegrown organization and the ones that hopefully with Zadarius Smith that will arrive that aren't homegrown, you have the best conglomeration of stars to win football games. There was always the chance that on whatever day Kwesi was hired, that this thing turned the page and the old guys, if you want to call them old, like Kendricks, 30. What is Thielen? 32. Cousins going to be 34. Dalvin's getting old for running back. There was always a chance that those guys were going to be jettisoned, but at least for a season, so that perhaps we can see what O'Connell can do with the dudes. The best players are back, and those are the dudes that drive the enterprise, that sell the jerseys, that put the butts in seats, are the best dudes available. So I think there might have been more reasons why you should be concerned rather than not concerned, but I think that the not concerned reasons probably generally supersede the concerning ones. But that is our maiden voyage. I'm going to work on guests. I'm going to have, Joe Everyman's come on here from Vikings Twitter. And yeah, if you want to come on the show, I'm working on the live part. I think all I have to do is press the button, but I got to figure out if this setup feels doable. And then as opposed to this US Bank background, I'm going to have some sort of purple background so that I don't have these weird globs of space with the blur and whatnot. But that's all we got for Vikes now. Let's get this thing off the ground. I hope that you enjoyed, and skol, baby.